We're going to give you an inside look at what may be going on in Putin's mind in these moves in Syria, and it's much more serious than people realize, and his game plan is much more extensive economically than you can imagine. We'll show you all of it later on the 700 Club. But right now, 11 trillion gallons. That's how much rain fell on the Carolinas over this past week. 11 trillion. And even though that historic rainfall has ended, the threat from more floods isn't over yet.
And as people in South Carolina are beginning to clean up, the overflowing rivers and streams could cause even more damage, more flood damage. Gary Lane has the story.
All eyes in South Carolina are focused on rising floodwaters. While the worst may be over, Governor Nikki Haley warns residents they may face additional danger.
The next 36 to 48 hours are going to be a time that we need to continue to be careful.
Days of heavy rain, overflowing rivers, and breach levees caused trillions of gallons of water to flood neighborhoods and businesses. At least 17 people have died, and more than 40,000 people are still without water.
I have 3 children at home. We don't have anything to even flush toilets or take showers.
500 roads and bridges are damaged or impassable. Businesses like this distillery in Lexington were ruined. Many residents face a long road ahead. They say their homes can be rebuilt, but some admit special family treasures and mementos will never be replaced. This Columbia woman says she'll need temporary housing.
I've lost my vehicle. Everything inside the house is basically damaged. It's really surreal to think about in one fell swoop, water can take away everything that you've owned or thought was important to you.
Others are just glad they survived. Ray Stillwell said water rushed into his house, and within 30 seconds, it quickly rose from below his knees to waist high.
I'm so grateful. If you hear me complain, remind me that I'm lucky to be here. God allowed me to be here. Now I just got to figure out what to do with the extra time I've been given.
And God's people are responding at this time. Many residents are thankful that Operation Blessing is now on the ground in South Carolina, bringing much needed help.
The State Emergency Operations Center has asked us to set up a mobile feeding alongside of their water distribution beginning tomorrow. We're going to continue to send out volunteers to the affected areas as we pray with residents, as we talk to them, and as we do the work.
Local volunteers like Mark Perez have joined the relief effort.
There's a lot of people who do try and help out in the community, but this is something really big, and it's something that's life impacting for forever, really.
Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, thanks, Gary. Ladies and gentlemen, we're sending truckloads of drinking water. They don't have drinking water in certain areas. We've got personal supplies, things like diapers and so forth we're sending down. And it's just one part of the massive effort that state needs. And so if you want to help, it's Operation Blessing, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia. You can participate in helping them. Isn't it amazing, Wendy, that flood is just extraordinary, that many trillions of gallons of water.
Well, they're saying they're kind of comparing the damage to Hurricane Hugo, and
yeah.
I lived in South Carolina during Hugo, and this is worse. They're saying this is actually worse than that.
I came down to Charleston right after Hugo had hit. I mean, we were down there doing a program on the streets and saw the devastation. And I remember the roof of one apartment house or office building. It was like he took a piece of paper, just like this paper, and crumpled it up. The roof was crumpled and thrown to the ground. It was just hideous. And they say this is worse.
The worst in 1,000 years. I don't know if they were keeping records 1,000 years ago, but they say this is just horrible. Our prayers and
pray
thoughts
for them. We're going to help them. Well, in other news, yesterday we told you that a new bill to reform our criminal justice system is making its way through Congress. Well, the Justice Department went ahead. They took a major step to relieve the pressure of overcrowding prisons. John Jessup has that story.
That's right, Pat. The Department of Justice is getting ready to release around 6,000 of those prison inmates. It would be the largest ever single release of federal prisoners, set to start around November 1st. Now, supporters of prison reform have argued that many people have been given unnecessarily harsh sentences because some laws were too strict. Some critics, though, are concerned some of those being released could be repeat offenders. Other experts, Pat, say the majority of them won't be.
non-violent offenders, somebody that's got 3 or 4 ounces of marijuana in his possession winds up with a 5-year sentence, or some with just a little bit more, 10 years. And they're being released, and they should be released. I also have advocated that all the agencies that have put criminal sanctions onto their regulations, those sanctions could be taken off by executive order of the president. He could, like, sign an executive order and cancel all the criminal penalties added by federal agencies that were not put through Congress. It would be a simple matter, and it would relieve the pressure on our criminal justice system beyond measure. John.
Pat, criminals in Eastern Europe have been caught trying to smuggle and sell radioactive material to ISIS terrorists. Take a look at this incredible video of a police sting in Moldova. Police have been working to capture smugglers like these for years now. Several have been arrested with materials that could have been used to create a nuclear dirty bomb. An Associated Press investigation reports gangs with Russian ties have been shopping around radioactive material across Eastern Europe, and it says there's a thriving black market in nuclear materials there.
We are very concerned by these different incidents of terrorists trying to acquire either nuclear or radiological material. We know that the threat is real. If terrorists acquire HEU, they will essentially have overcome one of the most difficult obstacles on the pathway to make what we call an improvised nuclear device, or IND.
So far, European authorities working with the FBI have interrupted 4 attempts by gangs to sell radioactive material in Moldova, a small country to the west of Ukraine. In February, one smuggler was looking to sell radioactive cesium to a buyer from the Islamic State. Pat, needless to say, this is a serious threat.
Serious is the understatement. And ladies and gentlemen, I emphasize over and over again, this world is really blowing apart. And we need prayer, but it's just like the excesses of violence are taking place, wars in every place, and part of it is the vacuum caused by the inactivity of our government. But I know you've been concerned about what Vladimir Putin is doing in Syria.
Since the beginning of Russia's military buildup in Syria, world leaders have been wondering what Vladimir Putin is really up to. Yes, Putin wants to rescue his ally, the brutal Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, from losing a bloody civil war. And Russia would like to hang on to its naval facility in the Syrian port of Latakia. But is that all Putin is after? Or does he have other goals as well?
We don't truly understand yet what it is that Russia is going to do in Syria.
What experts do know is that Vladimir Putin could create a lot of trouble in the Middle East. But in the process, he could also boost the ailing Russian economy, an economy that is still in the tank from low oil prices and from Western economic sanctions over Russia's annexation of Crimea. And despite Putin's efforts to diversify the economy, it still lives or dies with energy prices.
The ruble is very sensitive to the moves of oil prices. So if oil becomes cheaper, the ruble does the same.
Putin has taken a big gamble with the public at home by going into Syria. Polls show most Russians opposed sending troops to Syria. But perhaps Putin realizes that by moving into Syria, he can protect his ally Assad and gain the side benefit of rising oil prices, thus boosting the Russian economy and his standing at home. Russia's military buildup and bombing campaign in Syria have revived the so-called security premium, a small rally in oil prices based on the fear of shortages in other parts of the world because of war in the Middle East. A big escalation in fighting could mean a big escalation in oil prices. Russia is also competing with the Saudis for energy customers, and a war in the Middle East makes Saudi supplies look less reliable. And with its new airbase in Syria, Russia could coordinate with Iran to disrupt shipments from Persian Gulf and Red Sea terminals. So by unleashing his military in Syria, Vladimir Putin could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, both saving an ally and reviving Russia's oil-based economy. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Folks, I asked our production crew to give me a map about what's happening in the Middle East so you'll see the overall consequences. Now, here is Syria. Now, there is the Mediterranean, and here is the Suez Canal, where a great deal of shipment of oil. There are pipelines that come across Turkey into Europe. But here is the place that Putin is now claiming, I'm going to be in Syria. Now, here's the deal. Right next to Syria is Iraq. They have oil reserves of 140 billion barrels right next to Syria. Now, up from there is Iran with 157 billion barrels of oil. And down, of course, south of Iraq is Kuwait, and then the Persian Gulf. So the oil flows down the Persian Gulf this way, and it goes out through the Straits of Hormuz that is choked right there by Iran. So you've got 157 barrels. Now, the big prize, of course, is Saudi Arabia, 268 billion barrels of oil. Now, here you've got the majority, 60, 70% of all the oil on the planet right in this little area here. Now, the other place that can be controlled out of here, the oil will come down the Persian Gulf, and then often it could go south of Oman and back up into what is called the Bab el-Mandeb, which is Yemen. And it goes up the Red Sea, and it would be transported to Europe through the Suez Canal, which is right here. Now, if Putin has control over Syria and then comes into Iraq, and he's already got an alliance with Iran, he can force the Saudis into some kind of a concession. Now, up to this point, the Saudis have made a deal with America. They say, we're going to sell our oil to you, but it has to be priced in dollars, which means that if, for example, Turkey wants oil, or up farther into Russia, which has 80 billion barrels, if Russia wants to sell its oil on the world market, it has first to convert its rubles into dollars, and then people can buy oil. But once Saudi goes to Russia, or Iraq and Iran go to Russia, then all of a sudden the deal with the United States is off and our dollar is no longer supreme. We're talking about what it would take to choke off the economic progress of the whole European continent. And Putin, he knows what he's dealing with. So if he has control over the Suez, he has control over the Straits of Hormuz, he has control over the Bab el-Mandeb, he has control over all this oil, he will be the master of the universe. And he knows it. And he knows he can bring America to its knees if he gets that. Now, that's what he's playing for. This little piece of land here, Syria, is where he is now going to be in control. He will have control of Syria, and along with it, any pipelines that go across Turkey, the oil out of Iraq, the oil out of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the Persian Gulf, the Suez Canal, all this will be under his control. That's what he wants. He wants to take control of all of it, and that's how it'll be played out. But it'll come right out of Syria. Right now, he's got a naval base here on the edge of Syria. He has troops into Syria. He can now, of course, threaten Jordan. He can threaten Iraq. And, of course, his planes are actually incursioning into Turkey. The Turks have complained about him violating their airspace, and he can move against them. All this has tremendous prophetic significance if you read Ezekiel chapter 38. So that's where it all is. And that's the long game. So keep your eyes on what's happening. But we're giving it to him by default without him having to fire a shot. He's taking all this over. And our president is advocating or abdicating control of this entire region, which at this point has been the dominant, the United States has been the dominant player.